I used to believe a photograph could tell the truth. That one still image could hold the shape of love, the promise of forever, the definition of a good American family. But photographs, they lie in silence. They preserve what the eyes wanted to see, not what the heart refused to feel. And 28 years later, the silence inside that picture began to breathe again. The frame was still hanging in my father's living room, just above the piano he never learned to play. The glass was cracked along the corner, but no one had noticed. Because cracks don't exist in good American families, at least not the kind that appear in daylight. We were the Trumps of Maple Street. We hosted neighborhood barbecues. We sent thank you cards before the ink from the invitation had dried. We were polished, dependable, and admired. We smiled for the camera as if eternity depended on it. The photograph was taken on 4th of July 1997. You can tell by the paper flags on the table and the smoke curling up from my father's grill. I was 12, holding a sparkler, half laughing, half pretending to. My mother's hand rested on my shoulder, a perfect composition of grace and gentility. Even the dog looked patriotic that day, sitting neatly by the picnic bench. For years I believed that moment was who we were. Cheerful, safe, whole. The kind of family that made the world feel steady. But the camera doesn't capture what comes after. It doesn't show the nights when the house turns hollow, or the days when the air itself refuses to move. It doesn't show my mother's hand trembling slightly as she poured lemonade into those red plastic cups, or the way her smile faded a second too soon. The lens freezes perfection, and time protects the lie. I found the photograph while sorting through boxes after my father's funeral. The room smelled like dust and furniture polish, the scent of a man who worshipped order. Every corner was labeled, every drawer perfectly arranged. But grief has a way of making symmetry unbearable. I opened drawers I wasn't supposed to open, touched papers I wasn't supposed to touch. And there it was, beneath a stack of insurance forms and sermons from church. The photograph, the one that had followed us through decades of dinner tables and Christmas cards. At first, I only meant to clean the frame. When I turned it over, something slipped from the back. A folded piece of stationery, yellowed and fragile. It was my mother's handwriting. I hadn't seen it in 28 years. Her loops and curls were unmistakable, the kind of elegance women of her time practiced like prayer. There were only 4 words, written in fading blue ink, the ache behind the wallpaper. I didn't understand what she meant. Or maybe I did. And that was the problem. The phrase sat in my mind like a hum I couldn't silence. It followed me as I walked through the house, touching the walls she once painted. The wallpaper was still there, tiny blue flowers against cream, the kind of pattern meant to comfort. But all I could think of was that word. Ache. I sat on the floor beside the piano, holding that letter like it might bite me. And that's when I felt it. The strange sensation that the house was listening. Every creak, every faint rustle of air, sounded like a breath held too long. This wasn't the home I grew up in. It was a museum of unspoken things. Every photo, every neatly arranged book, every vase on the mantel was another brick in the monument of our silence. My name is Eleanor Trump, and for most of my life, I believed I came from the kind of family that magazines were made for. My father was the definition of dignity. My mother, the portrait of composure. And me, I was the reflection of both. I learned to smile through everything, to smooth every wrinkle before it showed. In our world, emotion was untidy, and untidiness was a sin. We didn't raise our voices, we didn't cry in public. We didn't say when something hurt. We just posed, again and again, until the picture looked right. For years I kept that photograph in a drawer, the way you might keep an heirloom you can't throw away but can't display either. I told myself it didn't matter anymore, that families change, people grow, memories fade. But that's not how silence works. Silence is a seed. It burrows under everything. waiting for time to crack it open. And now, 28 years later, I could feel it sprouting in me. I walked through each room that afternoon, tracing the outlines of what used to be ours. The kitchen still smelled faintly of lemon cleaner. The curtains still moved with the same rhythm they had when my mother hummed hymns while ironing. The house was frozen in the act of pretending, only I wasn't pretending anymore. When the sun dipped low, I sat by the window and turned the letter over in my hands, searching for more. A date, a signature, a clue. But there was nothing. Just those words, and the faint imprint of something beneath them. I held it up to the light and saw, pressed faintly into the paper, a second line that had been erased. If someone finds this, tell her I tried. Tell who? Tried what? The questions landed in me like stones dropped into a well. And I realized that maybe this wasn't a note at all. Maybe it was a confession that never found a voice. Outside, the neighborhood children were lighting sparklers. The same sound I remembered from the day of that photo. The same laughter. The same smell of smoke and summer. It was as if time had folded over itself, placing me right back in that moment, but older now, awake. I looked again at the faces in the frame. My father's proud, unyielding. My mother's soft, unsure. My own, caught somewhere between them. We looked happy. We looked whole. But I knew better now. The good American family wasn't a lie. It was a performance. One passed down like an heirloom, generation after generation, until someone finally dropped it. I don't know what made me whisper it out loud, but I did. Maybe to the photo. Maybe to the air. I see you now. And for the first time, I felt something shift. The silence answered back. Before I go on, I want to know where you're listening from tonight. Maybe you've held a picture like this too. One that used to mean safety, and now feels like a stranger's memory. Maybe your family had its own version of the good American dream, wrapped in Sunday smiles and unspoken rules. If you did, then this story is partly yours too. Because what I found next, what I heard behind that photograph, wasn't just my family's truth. It was the sound of generations learning to finally breathe. I stayed up late that night, unable to sleep, the note beside me on the table. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my mother's face. Not the polished one from the photograph, the other one. The one from my dreams. The one that always looked like she wanted to tell me something before the world cut her off. And somewhere between waking and memory, I heard her whisper again. Good girls don't ask questions, Ellie. But I wasn't a girl anymore. And I had a question. A question 28 years too late, but still burning. What happened the day after that photograph was taken? The bedroom kept the kind of quiet that makes you breathe softer, as if noise could wake something you are not ready to face. The curtains were closed. The bedspread was tight as a promise. On the dresser, bottles of perfume stood like patient saints. I opened one. The scent was faint and powdery. A memory of mornings when my mother stood here and made herself presentable to the world. Her jewelry box waited in the far corner, a small square of dark wood with a velvet lining, frayed where fingers had learned their way. I had avoided it for years. Some boxes feel like doors. This one did. I sat, let the bed sigh beneath me, and lifted the lid. Rings first. Thin, obedient rings that knew how to behave in public. A pair of earrings shaped like teardrops. A brooch in the outline of a leaf. Its veins done in small, careful lines. Under the felt tray there was a pocket of quiet. I slid my hand in and touched metal that remembered warmth. The locket was silver. Oval. Not polished in a long time. It had the patience of objects that know they will be found when the hour is right. I held it in my palm, and felt that strange throb the body gives when it recognizes something before the mind can name it. I did not open it at once. I only listened to the pulse in my hand, and the breath of the room, and the drawn-out hush that belongs to houses that have practiced silence for decades. I took the locket to the window and pulled the curtains back. Light climbed the metal, and woke a faint engraving along the edge. Not a name. Not a date. Just a few words pressed so lightly I had to tilt it 3 times to catch them. Tell her I tried. The same message I had seen ghosted into the paper behind the photograph. It was all one sentence, spoken in 2 places, separated by 28 years and a lifetime of good behavior. My mother would have worn this against her skin. Skin remembers more than photographs do. It remembers the weight of small things. It remembers where love was quiet and where it could not breathe. I turned the latch with my thumbnail. It stuck, then gave, then opened like a mouth that has been closed too long. Inside, the photograph was tiny. A girl on a porch. Hair braided to the side. Eyes that looked both into the camera and past it at once. The kind of look children wear when they have already learned to carry what is not theirs. I thought it might be my mother as a child. I thought it might be her mother. The resemblance was the kind that lives in the shape of the bone, rather than the surface of the face. On the other side, where we expect a second image, there was only cloth. A patch of pale ribbon fixed in place with a stitch so small it felt like tenderness itself. I touched the ribbon and felt a ridge beneath it, as if something thin and secret hid there. I did not pull it up. I closed the locket and held it to my throat instead. The chain was missing. I used the blue thread from the curtain hem, looped it through, and tied it clumsily behind my neck. The metal lay against me, warm now, present. A small weight that made my body honest about what it had been carrying for years. I looked at myself in the mirror. I saw a woman who had perfected the pose and forgotten the language of her own face. The locket looked right there, as if it had been waiting for the moment someone in this line would finally wear it as it was meant to be worn, not as decoration, as decision. I went back to the dresser and opened the top drawer. Neatly folded handkerchiefs made a white shoreline. Beneath them, a wide envelope tied with baker's twine. The handwriting on the front belonged to the same woman who had written the words about the wallpaper. To my future self, it said. There is a cruelty in that phrase when the giver is gone. There is also mercy. I broke the twine and slit out what the envelope had guarded. Recipes clipped from magazines. A church program with a hymn circled in pencil. A small card with the word magnolia at the top. And below it, a list of dates that would mean nothing to anyone else. Then a page written in that careful script, blue ink that had thinned with time. The descendants of the letters long, like thoughts that hesitate to come back up. Ellie, it began. I always hated that the name sounded like a secret spoken halfway. Ellie, I am trying. That is the trouble with good families. We mistake trying for loving. We mistake quiet for peace. We mistake rules for kindness. There are sounds a house makes when it is breaking. I have heard them for years. You cannot hear them yet. You will, one day, and I am sorry for that and also grateful. Because the day you hear them, you will stop pretending. And that is when you begin. The page shook in my hands. The locket warmed my skin like a small, steady candle. The letter did not accuse. It did not confess to acts I could put in a file and place blame upon. It did something harder. It named the atmosphere. It named the way love had been taught to hold its breath. It made a map that did not show roads, only weather. I sat on the floor and let my back rest against the bed. The carpet flattened beneath my weight in the shape of a woman who was finally too tired to sit tall for the camera. The house clicked somewhere in the walls, like knuckles being cracked after a long prayer. I could hear the faintest sound of a lawnmower 3 doors down. Ordinary life insisting on itself, while a private country rearranged inside my chest. When I was a girl, I learned our house by ear. The slow settle after the dishwasher. The one stare that complained under a careful foot. The hum of the refrigerator at night. The soft percussion of my mother setting plates down, not too loud, not too soft. Just so. A music built from restraint. I had called it safety. I see now it was choreography. We were all dancers in a routine no one dared to forget. Tell her I tried. I kept the locket in my fist and felt the engraving press into my palm. The message was not an apology. It was a record. It was also a request. Tell her I tried. Tell her. Tell who? Tell which daughter? Tell the one who learned to make her voice small before it had anything dangerous to say. Tell the one who would grow up and teach her own child that excellence is the same thing as love. I tasted metal and salt, and knew I had been both daughter and mother of this silence. I stood and walked to the hallway. The gallery of family portraits watched me pass. The frames had always felt like windows. Today they felt like mirrors. My father at a company dinner. My mother at a church bake sale, holding a pie she probably did not taste. My own wedding photo. The lace of my dress. The smile I practiced so carefully my cheeks ached for hours. I wanted to reach into each frame and loosen the shoulders of the people inside. I wanted to say, "You can breathe now. No one will find you for it." I paused at my wedding picture. I remembered the way my mother fastened the tiny buttons at the back of my gown. Her fingers fumbled once. Only once. She said tired under her breath, and then smiled like the sun had never set. I did not ask what tired meant that day. I did not ask why her eyes had that silvered look, like a pond skimmed with frost. I did not ask because good daughters do not make days harder. Good daughters keep the weather beautiful. In the kitchen, the late afternoon light laid stripes across the tile. The kettle lived where it always had. I set it on the burner and waited, because waiting gives shape to a room. I read the letter again. There were more lines, simple ones. I love you. I wanted you to know that if I did not learn it in time for myself, I learned it in time for you. You will know it faster. That is how inheritance should work. Inheritance. The word stretched in me. We say inheritance, and we mean property, policy, money, things you can fold and place in a fireproof box. But the first inheritance is always weather. The air you grow lungs for. The silence you were taught to call normal. The story told by the photographs and the space between them. We inherit the tone before we inherit the tableware. Then we spend our adult lives trying to translate a language we never knew we learned. The kettle whistled. I poured water over the same tea my mother liked, even though I prefer coffee. Taste is a country we travel to when we miss our dead. I sat at the table and placed the locket on the wood between my hands. The silver had left a faint circle of warmth at my throat. I could still feel it, like a ghost of touch. I wanted to open it again. I did not. Some doors ask for patience the second time. Across from me, the chair where my mother used to sit felt stunned by absence. I imagined her elbows on the table, her hands wrapped around a cup, the way she would listen without interrupting. She was not a woman who spoke to hear herself. She spoke to hold a room steady. There is a price for that kind of work when the room itself is leaning. I tried to picture the day she wrote this letter. The pencil on the church program told me it was a Sunday. Maybe the hymn had stirred something. Maybe the sermon had pressed on a bruise. Maybe the house had made that deep sound only she could hear. And she looked up from the sink and realized the china was shaking a little in the cabinet. Maybe she sat down and finally let her hands say what her mouth could not. Tell her I tried. Tell her. Tell her so she does not spend her life worshipping a photograph. I picked up my phone and typed a message to my daughter. Not a long one. Not the kind that pushes the ocean across a screen. I wrote, Eva, I am at Grandpa's house. I found something. Are you free later? I would like to see you. I deleted the last sentence twice before I left it. Want is a brave verb in our family. It makes your throat feel like new skin. She did not answer right away. I put the phone face down and let the room be itself. The tea went cool. The locket looked like a small moon fallen onto our ordinary table. I touched the ribbon inside again with my thumbnail through the closed case. There was a ridge. I knew there was. I whispered to the little door. When you are ready. Dusk came on like mercy. Colors softened. The house stopped standing so straight. I went back to the bedroom and placed the letter with the photograph, because some things find their fullest meaning only in each other's company. I stood there long enough for my body to learn the new arrangement of objects. Then, I took the locket back into my palm, and spoke to the air. Mother. I heard you. The sentence surprised me. I had not called her that in years. I had said Mom for so long it had lost its taste. Mother felt like a bell. The room did not answer, but I felt less alone inside it. My phone lit. Ava. She wrote. I can do breakfast tomorrow. Neutral words. A door held open with a foot. Relief stung my eyes in the small, grateful way that means you have been holding something heavy for longer than you admitted. Good American families love breakfast. We have our rituals. Pancakes that look like they came out of a magazine. Syrup in a pitcher warmed first. Cloth napkins ironed flat to suggest that even sweetness should not be messy. I smiled at the thought, and then let the smile fall. Tomorrow, we would eat ordinary food. On plates that did not match, without a plan for the words. We would try a different inheritance. I lay down fully dressed and closed my eyes. The locket pressed into my chest as I turned onto my side. I could feel each beat of my heart meet the metal and give it news. Tell her I tried. I imagined the engraving brightening with each thud, like a signal through water. I dreamt of a porch and a girl with a braid. She did not look at the camera this time. She looked at me. She raised a hand as if to greet me, and then put that hand over her own heart. When I woke, the room was the color of early forgiveness. I sat up. The locket had slid under the edge of the pillow. I fished it out, sat at the vanity, and opened it again. This time my fingers knew the hinge. The little door sighed and yielded. I lifted the ribbon with the pad of my thumb. Something thin was tucked beneath it. A note, no larger than a postage stamp, folded in half and then in half again. I teased it free. The paper was delicate but not fragile. It had the resilience of something that has waited. I unfolded it slow. The letters were small and careful. Not my mother's. Older. The ink had browned the way certain truths do when they have not been aired. It said, I kept quiet so you could stay. I see now it made you go. Forgive me. The signature was a name I did not know. I looked into the mirror and saw my face move through 3 generations in a breath. The girl on the porch. The woman at the dresser. The daughter at the table. The words in my hand made a small sound in my chest like fabric tearing and then mending at once. Inheritance, I whispered. Not the house. Not the china. Not the money. The weather. The tone. The decision. I closed the locket and tied the thread again behind my neck. I stood and felt taller, not by inches, but by permission. The house watched. The photographs watched. I let them. Today I would meet my daughter with the locket warm from my skin. I would put the letter on the table between us. I would tell the truth like a person learning a new instrument in a room where the old sheet music still waits. We might falter. We might play the wrong note. We might laugh at the wrong line. We might cry and then pretend we did not. But we would begin. If someone you love has lived their life inside a photograph, you can hand them this kind of softness. You can say, I found something. And it changed the weather in me. I am not asking you to agree. I am asking you to sit here while the air finds a new shape. If this story is touching a room in your own house, share it with the person who sits there. Sometimes the first voice that speaks is not loud. It is only steady. Sometimes that is enough to open the latch. I tucked the note back under the ribbon and listened as the house made that deep, relieved sound of wood, remembering it can be wood. Then I left the curtains open, and the dresser cleared, and the bed unmade. I wore the locket, and walked downstairs into a morning that did not require perfection to be called good. The cafe was one of those small-town places that tries to look effortless but isn't. Mismatched chairs, chalkboard menus, the faint smell of cinnamon and apology. I arrived early, because good daughters always do. I sat by the window, the locket warm against my throat, and waited for my daughter to arrive. When Eva walked in, she carried the same posture I once wore, that careful poise people mistake for confidence. Her hair was tucked behind one ear, her phone in her hand like a shield. For a moment I saw myself at her age, rehearsing the same performance in a different decade. "Hi, Mom," she said, sliding into the seat across from me. Her voice was polite. Too polite. The kind of tone that means I'm here, but let's not stay too long. "Hi, sweetheart," I said, though the word felt old-fashioned between us. We ordered coffee and pancakes we barely touched. We spoke about practical things. The weather, the neighbor's new dog, her work schedule. I tried to listen the way my mother once listened to me, but I could hear the echo of her silence underneath my own. It was strange, how inheritance doesn't always look like heirlooms. Sometimes it looks like two people afraid of the same words. After a while, Ava's eyes drifted toward the chain around my neck. "That's new," she said. "It was your grandmother's. She had nice taste." "She did," I whispered. "But she also hid things." Eva smiled, uneasy. "Didn't they all?" I wanted to tell her about the letter, about the note under the ribbon, about the ache behind the wallpaper. But I didn't know where to begin. Secrets, like roots, don't come out clean. They bring soil with them. Instead, I reached across the table and placed the locket between us. The silver caught the light and threw a small reflection onto the wood. A tiny moon between two worlds. "Would you like to see it?" I asked. Eva hesitated, then nodded. She opened it gently, as if it might cry out. Her thumb brushed the tiny photo. "She looks like you," she said. "Maybe she looks like us," I answered. Ava looked up. Her expression softened, but only for a moment. "Why are you showing me this now?" "Because I think I finally understand what she was trying to tell me." She waited. I waited too. "There's a note inside," I said. "It says, 'Tell her I tried.' And underneath the ribbon there's another one. It says, 'I kept quiet so you could stay. I see now it made you go.'" Ava's brow furrowed. "What does that even mean?" "It means," I said slowly, "that silence runs in the family." For a while, we didn't speak. The cafe filled with the sound of clinking cups and the low hum of morning conversations. A song played from the radio. Something soft, forgettable. But the melody brushed against memory. My mother used to hum that same tune while washing dishes. Eva broke the silence first. "You think she was unhappy?" "I think she was invisible," I said. "And I think I learned how to be invisible too." She didn't look away. "You mean with me?" I swallowed. "Especially with you." It wasn't an apology, not yet. It was a beginning. Ava leaned back, her eyes glistening. "You always seemed fine, Mom. Strong." "Strong," I repeated. "That's just another word for quiet sometimes." She nodded slowly. "Yeah, I know." Something in her voice told me she did it, not from stories, from experience. Outside, sunlight shifted through the window blinds, drawing lines of light across the table. One crossed directly over the locket, and I saw a reflection shimmer on the wall beside us. A faint, quivering shape that looked almost like a heartbeat. Maybe it was coincidence. Or maybe the house wasn't the only thing listening anymore. Eva closed the locket and handed it back to me. "You should keep it," she said. "I want you to have it one day," I answered. "Maybe when I'm ready." We both smiled, tired and real. The waitress came to refill our coffee, and the smell of roasted beans filled the air. For a brief second, the world felt ordinary again. 2 women, 2 mugs, the clatter of plates around them. But I knew something invisible had shifted. A thread had loosened. When we left the cafe, the sky was the color of tin. The kind of morning that doesn't promise much, but at least it's honest. Eva hugged me, awkward, but longer than usual. Then she walked away, her silhouette dissolving into traffic. I stood there for a while, the locket cold again against my skin. Then I turned toward home. The house greeted me with its usual hush. But it wasn't the same hush as before. It felt alert, waiting, the kind of silence that listens back. I placed my keys on the table and stood in the doorway. Light fell across the hallway photographs, catching their glass faces, and then, just as I was about to climb the stairs, I heard something faint. A sound from the study, a drawer sliding open by itself. The house was answering. And somewhere in its walls, my mother's voice was waiting to be heard. The drawer was open when I reached the study, only a few inches, like a mouth unsure whether to speak. I didn't remember leaving it that way. My father's desk had always been a kind of altar. Every paper squared, every pen in its precise trench. Even now, after his death, the order remained, as though his will had lingered to keep everything obedient. I stood in the doorway, not yet ready to cross the threshold. The air carried that particular scent of varnish and paper, the perfume of control. The same clock ticked on the wall, the second hand jerking forward like a heart learning to restart. "Dad?" The word escaped before I could stop it, a reflex of habit rather than belief. The drawer answered with silence. I stepped closer and saw what had pulled it ajar, a thin brown envelope caught between the edge of the desk and the frame of the drawer. My father's handwriting covered the front in tight black strokes. July 4th, 1997. Cassette. My breath snagged. The day of the photograph. I pulled the drawer open. Inside, resting on a square of faded velvet, was an old cassette tape. The label had begun to peel, but the date was clear. I turned it over in my hand, the plastic clicking softly. The magnetized ribbon inside shimmered like something alive. For a moment I couldn't move. I felt the same resistance I'd felt with the locket. That quiet knowledge that once you open certain things, you don't get to close them again. But curiosity is louder than fear when silence has lasted too long. I found my father's old tape recorder in the cabinet, the same one he used for sermons and dictations. Its batteries were corroded, but there was a cord. I plugged it in, pressed play, and waited. At first only static, then the familiar chaos of a holiday. Laughter, voices, the hiss of fireworks far away. My father's baritone, commanding as always. "Hold still, Ellie, you're blocking the flag," followed by my own giggle, a sound too bright for what I know now. Then the tape skipped. A pause. The texture of the air changed. A woman's breath. Soft. Hesitant. My mother. "If someone ever listens to this," she said, voice trembling around each word, "tell her I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. Tell her I tried. Tell her." A thud. Maybe the recorder being moved. Then my father's voice, calm and rehearsed. "The recording is over, Margaret." But she whispered one last thing before the tape clicked off. It was almost swallowed by the static, but I heard it. "The good family is breaking." I pressed stop, then rewound, then play again, as if repetition could change the ending. It couldn't. The tape always ended the same way, with truth refusing to fit inside a frame. I sat there for a long time, the machine humming beside me. The sound filled the study, spilling into the hallway. The house felt different now. No longer quiet, but listening. I realized that for years I had mistaken its silence for peace. It was never peace. It was containment. I looked at my father's books lined up on the shelves, sermons, self-help, patriotic essays, words about integrity, strength, faith. I wondered if he ever listened to this tape again, or if he sealed it in that drawer and prayed that no one would. He must have known I would come back one day. Maybe that's why he left it near the surface, not hidden deep. Some part of him wanted the truth to be found, but not while he was still alive to watch the ruin. I turned off the recorder. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It pulsed, as if the house itself were breathing in for the first time in years. I walked to the hallway, the locket heavy at my throat. I could almost feel my mother's presence following me. Not ghostly but human. A woman whose story had been cut short mid-sentence. In the dining room, sunlight spread across the long table, catching the dust in golden swirls. Every chair was in place, as if waiting for another family gathering that would never happen. I remembered the exact choreography of those dinners, grace said by my father, napkin folded by my mother, laughter timed like applause. It had been theater, and we had been its most devoted actors. I pulled a chair out, sat down, and pressed the locket against the table. The engraving bit faintly into the wood. "Tell her I tried." "Well," I whispered. "I'm listening." Something cracked above me. Just the house settling, maybe. But it felt like an answer. My phone buzzed. A message from Ava. "Thinking about Grandma? What was she like when you were little?" I smiled. The kind that trembles before it steadies. "Brave," I typed back. Then deleted it. Then wrote, "She taught me to listen even when no one was speaking." I didn't send it. Not yet. Some truths need to sit in the mouth before they learn how to travel. I stood and watched the living room. The photograph still lay on the mantel, its glass now cracked from my earlier cleaning. I lifted it, studying each face again. My father's command, my mother's politeness, my own obedience. 3 people performing a harmony none of them could hear. For the first time I noticed something in the background. A reflection in the window behind us. A woman standing near the porch, not part of the posed scene. Faint, almost erased by light. Her face turned toward the camera, though blurred. I held the photo closer. The hair, the posture, the dress. It was my mother. She was outside the frame, watching. The perfect family captured without the person who held it together. The observer, not the participant. That was the truth the camera missed. She wasn't inside the picture. She was trapped behind it. I placed the frame back, and felt the last layer of illusion peel away. The Good American Family had always been an exhibit, not a home. We were curated, not connected. And the curator had finally dropped the mask. I went upstairs, into the bedroom where I had found the locket. The letter still lay on the nightstand. I unfolded it once more, read the line that had haunted me from the beginning. "There are sounds a house makes when it is breaking." Now I knew exactly what she meant. The house was speaking, through drawers that opened on their own, through tapes that refused to stay silent, through photographs that revealed what the eye refused to see. And in that chorus of small awakenings, I could hear my own voice emerging, thin but steady. When Eva came tomorrow, I would let her listen to the tape. I didn't know what it would do to her. Maybe it would wound. Maybe it would heal. But for the first time, I wasn't trying to protect the illusion. The photograph, the locket, the letter, the tape. 4 witnesses to a single crime. The quiet suffocation of truth. Downstairs, the recorder clicked softly, though I hadn't touched it. The tape was rewinding itself, preparing to play again. The house wanted another listener. I stood in the doorway and whispered, "All right, I'm here." And as the first static hiss filled the air, I felt the walls exhale, the perfect family collapsing, at last, into something real. Night falls differently in a house that has begun to tell the truth. It does not rush. It lowers itself. It presses its hands on the shoulders of each room and asks, "Are you ready?" The hallway light thinned to a ribbon. The air cooled. I could feel the house listening the way a body listens after a long cry. Quiet, raw, alert. I did not turn on lamps. I wanted the dark to do its work. I walked barefoot from room to room, the locket warm where it rested against my throat, the tape recorder silent now on the table like a sleeping animal. Every surface held the faint glow of streetlight. Every picture frame glimmered like a small pool. I stopped at the first portrait, my father at a charity banquet, the flag behind him, the smile cut from stone. "I forgive you," I tried, and the words sounded like wood. I started over. "I forgive the boy who learned that control is the only way to be safe." My voice softened. "I forgive the man who mistook fear for strength." The glass threw my reflection back at me, my mouth unsure but moving. At the next frame, my mother held a pie at a church sale, the crust perfect, the eyes distant. "I forgive you," I whispered, "for staying, for leaving, for keeping the weather clear even when the sky had other plans." The locket pulsed with my heartbeat. I placed my palm on the glass and felt the cold answer. "I forgive the woman who taught me that invisibility was a kind of love." A smaller frame showed me at 12 in a rented patriotic dress, a pageant smile stitched across my face. "I forgive you, little one," I said, and felt my throat heat with the mercy of it. "You did not know the difference between applause and belonging. No one taught you. You learned survival as your first language." Forgiveness does not change the past. It changes the room where the past is kept. I could feel it in the air, molecules shifting like a flock turning. The hallway widened by a whisper. The floor made that soft easing sound wood makes when it remembers it is allowed to be imperfect. Downstairs the recorder clicked, not playing, not rewinding, only reminding me it existed. I left it and kept walking. The kitchen held its familiar lemon scent, but under it I could smell something else now. Something honest, the way bread smells just before it is done. I placed 2 mismatched plates on the counter. I did not know why. I only knew ritual was coming, and ritual likes to find its path before dawn. Back in the living room, the photograph of the 4th of July leaned against the mantel, the crack in its glass catching light like a small lightning bolt. I looked at the 3 of us, and felt the ache and the tenderness at once. We had done our best inside the story we were handed. We had called it goodness. We had called it home. We had been wrong, but not because we were bad. We were obedient to an inheritance that prized image over intimacy. The locket felt heavier. I opened it in the dark. The little photograph flickered. The tiny note under the ribbon seemed to breathe. I lifted it again, read the line I knew by heart now. "I kept quiet so you could stay. I see now it made you go. Forgive me." The signature hovered at the edge of my understanding. A name I did not recognize but felt in my bones. A grandmother. A great-grandmother. A woman whose mouth had been taught to close before it learned to speak. "Forgiven," I said to the room. And the word surprised me with its steadiness. "All of you. All of us. Forgiven." The house exhaled in a long seam. Somewhere, a pipe ticked. Somewhere a window relaxed in its frame. I sat on the stairs and let my body agree with what my mouth had said. This is the part no photograph shows. the quiet after the naming, when the nervous system learns that truth will not kill it. I pressed the locket to my lips. Not as a kiss, but as a seal. It ends here, I told the metal. The inheritance of silence ends here. I thought of Ava, and the way her eyes had softened at the cafe before they tightened again. A muscle memory of caution. I imagined her at her table now, scrolling, thinking, pretending not to feel. You do not have to pretend, I said to the empty staircase, and realized I was saying it to both of us. You do not have to earn love by being perfect. You can be loved and be loud. You can be loved and be wrong. You can be loved and change your mind. A rushing sound in my ears made me stand. I walked back to the study and pressed play one more time. I let the static pour. I let the holiday laughter pour. I let my father's voice pour. And when my mother's breath entered the room, I stood beside it like a woman standing beside a river she has finally decided to cross. If someone ever listens to this, she said. And now I heard what I had not heard before. Not only sorrow, but desire. The desire to be known. The desire to be held without having to hold the picture together. Tell her I tried. I am telling her, I said out loud, and the recorder, obedient to electricity and grief, kept playing as if to lay a bridge between our sentences. When the tape ended, I did not rewind it. I pressed stop and let the quiet gather. It did not feel dangerous anymore. It felt available. The difference between those two is what healing tastes like. Someone needs this, I thought, sudden and clear. Not only my daughter, someone outside this house. Someone driving home right now in a car filled with performed calm. Someone sitting in a kitchen where the clock is too loud. If this story is finding you, and you feel the picture slipping, you can put it down. If you are listening from a city far from mine, or a small town where everyone knows your porch light, speak your first small truth in the comments. Say where you are. Say what room it hurts in. Let the words exist in the same place as other people. It is easier to breathe when the breathing is shared. I stood and walked the hallway again, this time touching each frame as I passed. Thank you for carrying what you could, I told them. I will carry the rest differently. The glass did not answer, but the faces seemed less trapped by it. In the bedroom, I folded the letter and slipped it into the pocket of my robe like a living thing. I placed the 4th of July photograph face down on the dresser. Not to erase it, but to stop letting it teach. It had done enough teaching. Tomorrow it could be burned. Or it could be kept under a different name. We would decide in daylight, when ritual could be made with hands and breakfast, and a soft voice that does not apologize for shaking. Before sleep, I opened the window. The night came in without ceremony. Crickets worked at their tiny faith. Somewhere down the block, a late television murmured toward nobody. I lay on top of the quilt and let the darkness be kind. The locket cooled against my skin, but its heat remained under the surface like an ember that knows morning is close. A memory rose without asking. My mother and I in this same room, years ago, sitting on the floor with a box of old clothes between us. She held up a blouse and said, "This one is too good for every day." I said, "Every day is exactly when we should wear good things." She smiled, the real kind, the one that never made it into photographs, and said, "Maybe you will teach me that." I had forgotten until now. The past can be generous when you stop bargaining with it. I drifted and woke, and drifted again in small stitches of sleep. In one of those stitches, I saw the hallway of portraits with their glass removed, the photographs held in the open air like paper birds. In another, I saw Eva as a little girl, frosting on her chin, looking up at me the way children do when they are not yet afraid of your silence. "I love you," I told the dream version of her, and the words landed on the floor as something you could pick up. Just before dawn, I rose. The house had changed temperature. A hint of morning in the wood. I did not turn on lights. I wanted the ritual to greet the sun, not the switch. I gathered what I would need. The locket on my throat, the letter in my pocket, 2 plates already waiting, the photograph now face down. I set everything on the dining table and stood very still. "Mother," I said to the empty air, and the name did what it always does. It opened the door between worlds. "If you would like to be with us today, come sit at the table." I pulled out a chair. I did not look to see if anyone felt it. Some presences are best felt sideways. The first line of daylight found the edge of the table. I pictured Ava walking up the front path later. The small pause before the bell. The bravery of knocking on a door that has known you in your worst performances and still belongs to you. I pictured us plating eggs on mismatched dishes, our hands close and ordinary. The conversation not fancy, not fixed, just movement in the direction of whether we can breathe. "If we falter," I told the room, "we will not stop. If we say the wrong word, we will stay. If we cry, we will leave the tears on our faces until they decide to leave on their own." The house listened like a witness. The portraits watched like relatives who have seen too many seasons to be surprised by one more dawn. Forgiveness is not the end of a story. It is the tool you carry into the next chapter. I picked up the locket and pressed it once to my lips. "We will use you well," I told it. Not as proof, but as promise. Outside, a bird drew a line of sound across the yard. "Morning." I breathed with it. The ritual had already begun. We only needed to step into it. And when we do, when my daughter walks through this door and sits across from me, and we let the old weather blow through without rebuilding the walls, this house will finally learn a new sound. Not the hush of a picture behaving. The simple, holy noise of a home. Morning arrived quietly, like someone walking barefoot through the house. The air was still cool from the night, and the light came slow, shy at first, then confident. I had opened all the curtains so nothing would hide. Every room wore the color of honesty. The table was set, but imperfect. 2 mismatched plates, 1 chipped, 2 cups from different decades. I placed the photograph face down in the center, the locket resting on top of it, silver glinting against the cracked glass beneath. The letter was folded neatly beside it, a small square of history waiting for a new translation. When the doorbell rang, my heart startled the way it used to before report cards or family dinners. I wiped my hands on the dish towel, even though they were already dry. Ava stood in the doorway, hair still damp from a shower, sunglasses in her hand, no makeup, no performance. "I brought croissants," she said, holding up a paper bag. "From that place you like?" I smiled. "You remembered." "I remember most things," she said softly. She stepped inside and stopped. "It smells different in here." I opened the windows, I said. The air needed to change. We moved to the kitchen. I poured coffee. She unpacked the pastries. For a while there was only the sound of butter knives against plates, the gentle clink of cups, the kind of noise that once would have been considered impolite. Now, it felt like prayer. Eva looked around. "You moved the photograph." I did. "Are we going to talk about it?" "We are." She nodded. "Okay." We sat. No grace was said, but the silence between us was the holiest sound I'd ever heard. I reached for the locket and placed it in her open palm. The metal was still warm from my skin. "She left this for us," I said. "For me first, and now for you." Eva turned it over carefully, tracing the engraving. "Tell her I tried," she whispered. "It's strange. It almost feels alive." "Maybe it is," I said. "Objects remember what we forget." She smiled faintly. "You really believe that?" "I used to think belief was about proof," I said. "Now I think it's about tenderness." She looked down at the table. Tenderness isn't something we were good at. No, I admitted. But maybe we can start now. The light shifted, brushing her hair with gold. She looked so much like my mother in that moment that I had to blink. The same soft jawline, the same tired grace, 3 generations of women learning to breathe through the same ache. I handed her the folded letter. This was inside the jewelry box. She wrote it the year she died. Ava hesitated. Do you want me to read it? If you'd like. She unfolded it, her eyes moving slowly over the words. Her lips parted on a sigh. She says she was sorry, that she mistook trying for loving. Yes, she was talking to you. She was talking to all of us. Ava's voice trembled. I don't know why that makes me angry. Because we were raised to think trying is enough, I said. And it isn't. She nodded, tears gathering but not falling. I spent so long trying to be good, she said. Not happy, just good. I reached across the table. My hand hovered for a second, then rested on hers. So did I. Her shoulders dropped. It's exhausting. It is, I said, and it's over. We sat like that for a while, holding hands across the chipped plates and half-eaten croissants. The clock on the wall ticked, not as a warning but as rhythm, the pulse of something human returning. When she finally spoke again, her voice was smaller. Do you think Grandma forgave herself? I looked at the photograph face down on the table. Maybe she didn't get the chance, I said, but I think she hoped we would. Eva ran her thumb over the locket again. So, what now? Now we stop being good, I said. We start being true. She laughed softly. That sounds terrifying. It is, I said, but it's also what freedom sounds like. We finished our breakfast without hurry. The sun climbed higher, lighting the table until everything on it glowed. The letter, the locket, the coffee stains, even the crumbs. The imperfections looked like proof of life. When the plates were empty, I stood and went to the fireplace. I held the old photograph by its edge. Do you want to help me? I asked. Ava joined me, eyes wide. What are we doing? Letting go. I tore the photo in half, then again, until only small pieces remained. We placed them in the fireplace together. The match flared, bright and brief. The paper curled, turned black, then gold, then ash. The house sighed. I swear it did. When the flames quieted, I reached into the ashes and pulled out one piece that hadn't fully burned. The outline of my mother's hand on my shoulder. I placed it in a small glass bowl on the mantel. Not everything has to disappear, I said. Some things can simply change shape. Eva watched me, her eyes soft now. You really believe in this, don't you? The ritual. I believe in giving shape to what has no words, I said. That's all a ritual really is. She nodded. Then what's next? I smiled. You tell me. She looked around thinking. Then she reached for the locket, opened it, and placed the smallest piece of ash inside, just enough to darken the silver. Now she's part of us, she said. I swallowed the lump in my throat. That's beautiful. Ava closed the locket and handed it back. No, she said. It's yours. For now. The clock chimed once, noon, maybe, or just coincidence. And the sound carried through the house like a benediction. The walls didn't feel tight anymore. The air didn't hum with secrets. We cleaned the table together, wordless but connected. There was laughter once or twice. Awkward, spontaneous, real. When she left, she kissed my cheek. It was quick, but it stayed. After she was gone, I sat again at the table, the locket cool in my palm. I looked at the spot where the photograph had burned, at the faint grey dust marking where an old story had ended. Then I whispered the only prayer I knew anymore. Let the silence stay quiet this time, not as punishment, but as peace. Outside, the wind moved through the trees, steady and soft, as if the world had heard me. Evening returned with the same calm light that had opened the day. The house was quieter now, not tense, not waiting. Just quiet in the ordinary way a heart is, after it finally tells the truth. The rooms no longer leaned in to listen. They simply existed. I made tea instead of coffee. The act felt ceremonial, as if heat and water could remind me how transformation works. I carried the cup to the living room and sat near the fireplace. The faint scent of ash was still there. Not sharp, but sweet. Like smoke that had forgiven itself for burning. On the mantel, the small glass bowl held the last fragment of the photograph. The piece of my mother's hand. I touched the locket at my throat. It was warmer than it should have been. I whispered, "She's here," though I didn't need to say it aloud. Presence doesn't need witnesses. It only needs recognition. Outside, the sky was turning lavender, the color of endings that don't hurt. The kind that makes space instead of closing it. I stood and walked through each room one last time. Not to check or to fix, but to see. The photographs on the hallway wall looked different now. Not because they'd changed, but because I had. The faces seemed human again, not monuments. I even smiled at my father's portrait. I think he would have liked that. In the kitchen, 2 plates dried in the rack, side by side. One still held a small crescent of croissant, a crumb of our new beginning. I didn't clean it. I let it stay. Evidence of life, unedited. Back in the living room, I set the locket on the table and opened it. The ribbon inside had loosened, revealing the ashes Ava had placed earlier, a faint grey dust against the silver. They didn't look like loss. They looked like the soil of something new. I whispered, "We did it, Mother." And then, softer, "I think you'd like who we're becoming." For a long moment nothing happened. Then the window curtain lifted with a passing breeze, brushing my arm like a touch. It wasn't dramatic. It was kind. A gesture that said, "Yes, I see you too." I closed the locket, tied the thread behind my neck again, and felt it settle against my skin. No longer heavy, no longer a chain. Now it was simply part of me. The quiet pulse of a lineage rewritten. I picked up the letter one last time, the edges softened by handling. I folded it and slipped it inside a new envelope, one that bore no date and no name. Then I wrote, in my own hand, "For whoever needs it next." I placed it inside the top drawer of the desk, the same one where I'd found the tape, and closed it gently. When I turned away, I didn't feel the need to look back. That's how you know a chapter has closed properly. Not with finality, but with peace. I stepped outside, barefoot on the porch. The evening air wrapped around me, cool and forgiving. The neighborhood was quiet. Sprinklers clicking, a dog barking somewhere, the distant hum of a radio. Ordinary life, doing what it does best, continuing. I sat on the steps and looked at the sky. The first stars were appearing, small and unassuming. I thought of my mother, and her mother, and all the women before them who had learned to hold their breath inside a smile. I exhaled, slow, full, and hoped they felt it wherever they were. Because release moves both ways in time. When one of us breathes, they all do. A car passed, headlights brushing the yard. For a moment I saw my reflection in the window, older now but lighter, as if the years had rearranged themselves. I didn't see the good American daughter. I saw a woman who had finally learned that being good was never the point. Being real was. I whispered into the dusk. The good American family was never the lie. The silence was. The words sounded steady this time, not sorrowful. They were the closing line of a story that had waited nearly 3 decades to be spoken. I stayed there until the tea cooled, until the horizon turned from violet to indigo, until the house behind me began to glow with the first indoor lights of night. And then, for no particular reason, I smiled. Maybe because I finally understood what my mother meant when she wrote, "Tell her, I tried." She wasn't confessing. She was blessing the attempt. Because trying, when done in truth, is how we become whole again. I stood, stretched, and whispered one last thing. Not to the air, not to the past, but to whoever might be listening now. If this story found you, maybe it's because your silence is ready to end, too. Tell someone. Tell yourself. Tell her you tried. The night took the words gently. The wind moved through the trees, repeating them in its own language. And for the first time in my life, the echo that returned was mine.